Two of China's most powerful warships, the same waters, the same enemy target. Then, catastrophic miscalculation. What began as a routine blockade of a Philippine supply vessel ended in a collision so severe the Chinese Coast Guard cutter was left unseaworthy. But this wasn't a clash between nations. This was China versus itself. This is the story of Scarborough Shoal, where three superpowers collided, literally and politically, in one of the most dangerous moments in modern naval history.
Scarborough Shoal. To the Chinese, Huangyan Island. To the Filipinos, Bajo de Mazinloc. But to naval strategists worldwide, it's something far more valuable. A flashpoint. Located 140 miles west of the main Philippine island of Luzon, Scarborough Shoal sits squarely within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, defined under international maritime law. Yet China claims it as its own, drawing on maps with ambiguous historical boundaries to assert sovereignty over nearly the entire South China Sea. In 2012, China effectively seized the shoal during a tense standoff with the Philippine Navy. Since then, Chinese vessels, military destroyers, Coast Guard cutters, fishing militia have maintained a permanent presence, using aggressive tactics to prevent Filipino ships from accessing the waters. The atoll itself is barren, no permanent settlement, no valuable resources that justify the intensity of this dispute. What makes Scarborough Shoal strategically crucial is its location. It guards the narrowest shipping corridor in the South China Sea. Over $3 trillion in global commerce passes through these waters annually. Whoever controls Scarborough Shoal controls one of the world's most critical maritime choke points. For China, control of Scarborough Shoal isn't about the atoll itself. It's about consolidating a 9-dash line, a massive territorial claim that encompasses 90% of the South China Sea. The International Tribunal ruled against this claim in 2016, but Beijing ignored the verdict entirely. For the Philippines, Scarborough Shoal represents the last line of defense. Give it up, and Manila's exclusive economic zone becomes indefensible. For the United States, the stakes are even higher. The right to sail anywhere international law permits, a principle that defines American naval supremacy. By August 2025, tensions had reached a fever pitch. The Philippines had launched Kadiwa operations, government-led missions to resupply and support Filipino fishing communities operating within their own economic zone. China responded with harassment, water cannons, and tactical intimidation. But on Monday, August 11, 2025, something unprecedented happened. China's own military forces collided.
The Philippine Coast Guard vessel BRP Suluan, a small patrol craft, was escorting fishing vessels during a resupply mission. Aboard, 35 Filipino fishermen, civilians, and government officials. What followed was a textbook demonstration of what military strategists call gray zone tactics. Aggressive maneuvers designed to intimidate without crossing into open warfare. The Chinese Coast Guard cutter 3104, a Zhangdao-class fast attack vessel, immediately moved to intercept. The crew deployed water cannons, high-pressure jets designed to disable communications and disable small vessels. This was harassment, pure and simple. A deliberate show of force against Filipino civilians exercising their lawful right to fish. But the Philippines didn't retreat. BRP Suluan's captain understood that backing down meant surrendering not just Scarborough Shoal, but the principle of freedom of navigation itself.
Alter your course. You are illegally in Chinese territorial waters. The Suluan didn't comply. It continued its escort mission.
A Chinese Navy destroyer, the Guilin, a 052D class guided missile destroyer, one of China's most capable surface combatants, cut directly in front of the Philippine patrol vessel. The destroyer's captain attempted a dangerous maneuver to physically block the Filipino ship and force it to change course. But in doing so, he created a bottleneck. The Coast Guard cutter 3104, still pursuing the Suluan at high speed, couldn't stop in time. The collision was brutal. The Coast Guard cutter, moving at ramming speed, struck the destroyer's port side bow. The impact was so severe that the cutter was rendered unseaworthy. Its bow was crushed, structural integrity compromised. Visible in the footage, 2 Chinese sailors stood at the cutter's bow, desperately attempting to deploy a fender, a rubber bumper, to absorb the impact. They were milliseconds too late. What made this collision truly historic wasn't the damage, it was what it revealed. China's gray zone tactics were so aggressive, so poorly coordinated, that its own military forces collided with each other. And the world was watching. The Philippine Coast Guard immediately offered assistance, medical support, man-overboard recovery. This wasn't vengeance, it was professionalism and maritime tradition. The Filipinos showed restraint when they could have escalated. But Beijing didn't see restraint. It saw humiliation. Within hours, China's military released statements claiming the collision was the Philippines' fault. They blamed the BRP Suluan for dangerous maneuvers. They ignored the presence of their own destroyer. The narratives diverged immediately. But China couldn't control what came next. 2 days later, on Wednesday, August 13, 2025, the USS Higgins, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, 9,200 tons, equipped with the most advanced radar and weapon systems in the world, sailed deliberately toward Scarborough Shoal. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a routine patrol. This was a deliberate message. Behind the Higgins, USS Cincinnati, a littoral combat ship optimized for shallow water operations in contested zones. The United States was sending 2 distinct signals with one operation. We're here, we're staying, we're testing your response. In military doctrine, this is called a freedom of navigation operation, or FONOP. The principle is simple. If a nation claims territorial waters but cannot legally claim them under international law, the U.S. Navy challenges that claim by deliberately sailing through the disputed zone without requesting permission. Under the 1982 Law of the Sea Convention, which even China has signed, a territorial sea extends only 12 nautical miles from a coastline or naturally formed feature like an atoll. Beyond that is international waters. Warships have the right of innocent passage even within the 12 nautical mile zone. Scarborough Shoal is an uninhabited atoll. It's not a continental island. Technically, its territorial waters extend only 12 nautical miles. But China doesn't care about technically. Beijing claims a 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone around Scarborough Shoal, a claim that contradicts international law and conveniently extends Chinese control into Philippine waters. As the USS Higgins approached the shoal, a Chinese Navy frigate, the Li Zhou, a Type 054A destroyer, radioed a direct challenge.
USS Higgins, this is Liu Zhou. You have illegally entered the territorial waters of Huangyang Island. Alter your course and leave immediately.
The USS Higgins didn't respond with an apology. The captain maintained course. For approximately 90 minutes, the American destroyer sailed within 12 nautical miles of Scarborough Shoal, directly asserting the right of freedom of navigation. This was the test China hoped would never come. After years of harassment, gray zone tactics, and intimidation, the United States was calling the bluff directly. China released footage of the encounter. The LeHud was stayed with the USS Higgins the entire time, shadowing the American destroyer, tracking it on radar, maintaining constant communication. But, and this was crucial, the LeHud didn't attempt to physically block or ram the Higgins. It didn't escalate. Why? Because the United States Navy has 11 aircraft carriers. China has 3. The power imbalance was too great to ignore. What China did instead was release statements claiming it had expelled the USS Higgins, that Chinese forces had drove away the American destroyer. The U.S. Navy flatly denied this. China's statement about this mission is false. USS Higgins conducted this FONOP in accordance with international law and then continued on to conduct normal operations. The United States is defending its right to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows. The USS Higgins didn't leave because China demanded it. It left because it had completed its mission. But in the world of geopolitical messaging, perception is everything. China needed to claim victory. The U.S. needed to assert principle. Both sides claimed success. Both sides were technically correct, and both sides were propagandizing. But the collision between China's own warships wasn't just an embarrassment. It was a window into the fragility of China's grip on the South China Sea. When China's military forces were so aggressive toward Filipino civilians that their own ships collided, it suggested something deeper. Beijing's strategy was beginning to destabilize. Since 2023, there have been over 20 documented incidents of Chinese vessels harassing Philippine ships in the South China Sea. Each incident pushed boundaries further. Each incident normalized more aggressive behavior. But the collision proved those boundaries had become dangerous.
The collision at Scarborough Shoal exposed something critical about China's South China Sea strategy. It's reaching the limits of escalation. Gray zone tactics work when they remain ambiguous, when they're deniable, when they don't cross into direct military confrontation. But a collision between military vessels, damage to a China Coast Guard cutter rendered unseaworthy, couldn't be hidden. It couldn't be deniable. It had to be explained away. The response from regional powers was immediate. Australia's embassy expressed concern about the dangerous and unprofessional conduct of Chinese vessels. The Philippines, humiliated by the blockade attempts, found validation. India, already conducting joint patrols with the Philippines, saw confirmation that China's aggression was destabilizing the entire Indo-Pacific region. For the United States, the USS Higgins operation was a reaffirmation of a foundational principle. America's Navy will sail where international law permits, full stop. This wasn't new policy. This was a reminder that U.S. commitment to freedom of navigation is absolute. The Philippines used the incident to accelerate its own military modernization. If China was willing to collide with its own ships rather than back down from Philippine civilians, then Manila needed superior maritime capabilities. The Philippines is acquiring new vessels, modernizing its Coast Guard, and deepening its military relationship with the United States. Under the Trump administration, U.S. FONOPs in the South China Sea have actually declined compared to previous years. Only 2 declared operations in 2025 through August, compared to 5 in 2023. But when they do occur, they're more deliberate, more direct, and more symbolic. China's response to the USS Higgins operation was predictable. State media released footage, military spokespeople issued combative statements, Beijing claimed it had driven away the American destroyer. But behind closed doors, Chinese military strategists understood something troubling. Their ability to control the South China Sea through coercion was being directly challenged. The broader pattern is clear.
China's assertiveness in the South China Sea has been steadily increasing since 2012, when it seized Scarborough Shoal. Each year brings new incidents. Each year brings more aggressive tactics. Each year brings closer calls between Chinese and American forces. The collision on August 11th represented a critical moment, the point at which China's own tactics became so aggressive they began undermining Chinese interests. You can't maintain a credible military if your own ships keep colliding with each other.
Scarborough Shoal is more than a geopolitical flashpoint. It's a symbol. It represents a contest over who gets to define the rules of international maritime law in the 21st century. Does international law matter, or does military might determine who controls critical waterways? For decades, the United States Navy has answered, international law matters. The principle of freedom of navigation isn't negotiable. And when other nations attempt to rewrite maritime law through coercion, the U.S. will respond. China's answer has been different. Possession and de facto control matter more than legal claims. Through relentless presence, through harassment, through military intimidation, China believes it can eventually exhaust the patience of smaller nations like the Philippines. But the collision between the Guilin and the Cutter 3104 suggested a crack in that strategy. Ultimately, this isn't a story about one shoal or one collision. It's about the question that will define the next decade of global security. Will the international order based on rules and law survive, or will it be replaced by one based on military power? The answer won't be decided by rhetoric or media claims. It will be decided in moments like the one we witnessed at Scarborough Shoal, when real ships carrying real sailors make real decisions about whether to stand firm or step back. The USS Higgins sailed through those waters not because it was the easiest path. It sailed there because the principle of freedom of navigation demanded it. China's response, shadowing the American destroyer but not escalating further, suggested that even Beijing understands there are limits to coercion. But how long that remains true is the question upon which global peace now depends.